Hey guys, welcome back. Episode 11. As you can see, we've got a lot to update on today. Some big progress. We have a whole environment in now, which is super exciting. Before we get to any of that, I want to talk about a horrendous mistake that I made. This was all the way back in October, I think, where I managed to break just about everything. So I'm going to talk about this first, and then get to all this new exciting stuff. So, .meta files. .meta files and ignoring them is a really bad idea. So, what I thought a .meta file was, right, is let's say you have a Java file, and when you compile it, it generates a .class file for each Java file. You don't actually need that like in your version control, right? That's just a compiled Java bytecode, so there's no point in tracking that. Now, in Unity, for all of your assets, like materials, scripts, even folders, I think, Unity generates a .meta file for all of those. And I assumed it was the same type of situation, right? Where it's just like, it's just some random file that, is like build data or something. I don't actually need it, like, in my repo. It's very, very wrong. Turns out, .meta files are extremely important. You really want to keep track of those guys. So what is a .meta file? It basically it does a few things. It stores like information on like how to import the asset properly, and it basically tells Unity where and how you're using that asset throughout your project, right? So what happens is if you don't have your meta files, if you say just go and delete a meta file, then Unity will not know how to link that asset to any of your game objects or like where to put it in your project, basically. So everything breaks. And I don't know exactly how I managed to do this, but at some point back in October, I managed just to lose all of my meta files, like every single one. I think I was messing around with my branches, which is weird because the whole issue is that I wasn't tracking my meta files in the first place, so changing branches and resetting and stuff shouldn't affect my meta files because they weren't even being tracked. I can't remember what I did, honestly, but I lost them all, and everything broke. Now, when I say everything broke, right, so this is how things looked, right? This whole environment this whole like library, which I think looks really nice. And then within the space of like 5 minutes, we went to this. Which, sucks, to be honest. Like you can see like everything is just broken. You've got every asset has like missing material and, missing scripts. All of the code that I've written, that was all still there, but it wasn't linked into anything anymore. It didn't actually do anything. So, yeah, everything was broken, and it sucks. If there is one thing to take away from this entire Dev Diary series, it's make sure you're tracking your meta files in version control. Do not put them in your git ignore, because it will screw you. I'm surprised it hadn't screwed me before. I've had issues like this in previous projects where I've just been messing around and lost stuff. And I think that's probably what the issue was. And this is just the first time that I've actually realized what I was doing wrong. So if you have a Unity project and you're using version control, like honestly right now, just check your git ignore and make sure .meta is not in there. You will thank me, trust me, because this sucks. Anyway, that's out of the way. So yeah, like 12 hours of drag and dropping later, not even an exaggeration, it literally took about 12 hours of my weekend to fix all this, just reassigning all the references. That tarantula was fine, somehow. Don't know, he pulled through, the champion. After getting this all fixed, we got the environment back, which, makes a big difference. It's amazing how, we go from looking like a tech demo to looking like something that you actually might have on a storefront. Yeah, just like with some assets populating things. So the whole sort of library environment is a big bundle package from the asset store. And this is why the asset store can be really cool. I think it does get sometimes it gets a bit of a bad reputation for all the asset flips you get. People will just make the same 10 games, but just download different assets for free off the store, and then just keep flipping those over, and it's the same game every time, but just looks a bit different. So I think there's maybe something to be said for trying to shy a little bit away from some of the especially maps and level layouts and stuff. I've definitely played a fair few games where it's like, hold on, I recognize this exact map. I played this in a different game. So maybe try and shy away potentially from ones that you might have seen before in other games. It's not a huge deal. I guess it just depends on what you're going for. This library, it wasn't free, but it was only 15, 20 quid, I think. Which, as far as I'm concerned, is a bargain because it looks beautiful, honestly. The guy that did it did a really good job, I think. I'll put a link to this package in the description. So now we have a whole environment around. I think I said in a previous dev diary that I wanted to get the game mechanics in and the system functionally done almost before putting the environment in, rather than doing environment first and then trying to kind of squeeze everything into the space that I'd already set myself. Because the priority is the game mechanics, right? Rather than the look of the thing. So after last episode, we pretty much have all the levels not done, but mechanics-wise, pretty much ready, to be honest. There's not gonna be any massive changes at this point. There's still more things coming, but I'm not expecting those things to, really take up any space in the environment or anything. Yeah, the point is, I guess, is if you're just one dev, then the asset store can really help you out, because, this would have taken me so long to, I wouldn't even know where to start, to be honest with you, to make an environment that's even half this nice. There's so many, textures in here that would not know where to begin, to be honest. So this saved a ridiculous amount of time, and probably has ended up looking nicer than anything that I would be able to do in any reasonable time frame anyway. The asset store can be a huge benefit, I think. So what do we actually get from this package? So the general structure, the environment and stuff. I put in some of these sort of trees outside the window that kind of sway in the wind a bit, just to kind of give you something to look at, I guess. Make it seem a bit nicer. So now that we have an actual environment we're sitting in, something we do have to consider is the lighting. So if we look back at our October build, and this is what I mean again, this just looks like a prototypey tech demo type thing. And that's only a couple of months ago. The difference of that to what I just showed you in terms of actual work isn't really that much if you just get, some pre-built assets. Anyway, so looking back at the October build, the light sources are kind of just floating in the air, right? They're not really coming from anywhere, which for the purposes of this is fine. But now that we actually have an environment, the light source should be coming from the lights, right? So if we have a look back at the current build, so I think it helps to have multiple light sources of different types, because that's what you have in real life, right? You would not usually be in a room where you just have, one light bulb, and that is lighting the entire room. You'd have, light coming in through the windows, and you'd have, even in this room, right, you can see warmer artificial lights behind me, and then the light coming in from outside. And that's kind of what we're going for here. So we have light coming in from the big window, which looks really nice, I think. That's a big directional light. And then we have the warmer light from the candles on the other side of the room. And we also have lights on the ceiling, if the video is going to show us. Yeah, there you go. So we have a couple of lights going on. And you can see that that's then casting shadows on the spider here. Which I think, the shadows definitely add to it, I think. Especially the kind of like spider creepiness. I think shadows definitely help kind of elicit some of that response. So, one thing that you might remember is... Was this last episode? Maybe. We put in some mazes. So, again, in this old build, we just have, you know, a light sort of floating, looking at the maze. In the new build, I didn't want to put the maze, like, really far away from the player. I wanted to keep it in the same place. But the lights that are in the environment don't really fit into that all that well. So, I put some new lights in. So, if you see what I mean, the lights on the ceiling are like above and behind the maze, so they wouldn't actually be lighting it there. So, I've put in some spotlights, which you can see here. And that is, yeah, basically there's one that's lighting up the maze as a whole, and then one that's lighting up just the spider. And again, that's casting some really cool shadows that definitely add to the, like, ugh, kind of feeling that you get, right? There's a whole bunch of, yeah, like, vector maths going on here to make these spotlights follow the spider properly. I'll drop a link to the repo, as normal, in the description, so you can have a look at that code. It's not particularly elegant, but it does the job. And then same for the ceiling maze too. So you can see we've got shadows for the spiders on the table being cast by the ceiling lights, and we have shadows for the spider on the ceiling being cast by the spotlights. You may notice that that's a lot of lights and a lot of shadows, which it is, and there's definitely performance considerations to start thinking about. We're going to talk about that next episode, I think, along with testing. Because, yeah, there's definitely been a couple of issues with all of these shadows. I mean, you've got 2 lights there, and then like 10 spiders on the table. That's 20 shadows already, right? All being rendered at the same time, which is a lot of work for the GPU to deal with. But yeah, so that's lighting, and yeah, it's coming along, guys. Like, I'm getting pretty happy with this now. It's definitely starting to look like a real system, so good progress. Another little touch that I've added, just to make the environment kind of have a bit more ambience, I guess, is I've added this little radio on the table here, which is playing some of my guitar, actually. And I've set this audio source so that we're basically playing the sound like localized to that radio. So in your headphones you hear it, you know, coming from that particular direction, rather than just sort of ominously all around you. And that just kind of brings the environment together a bit more, I think, and just kind of helps create the atmosphere, I guess. I either need to find some more music to play, like download some, or I need to, yeah, polish up my playing there, because it's a little bit rusty. I need to find some more, like, more songs too, because I think the one song playing over and over again might start to drive people insane after a session or two. And that's going to be toggleable on and off. And that's a whole different thing, actually. It's going to be a whole different UI for stuff like that. I don't want to spoil that yet. That relates to, if you have a look at the menu. So all of this menu UI is new. And each level, once you get 100% on a level, you start earning stars. And those stars are going to be used for things like unlocking new music and unlocking new environment customizations and stuff. But I don't want to get too far into all that just yet, because that's going to be a future episode. But yeah, so this whole UI is new. Honestly, it really helps us with testing the thing out, because before, whenever I wanted to go between a different level, I'd have to stop the system, go into a script, you know, change a variable, and then launch it again, and then it would take me into whatever level I'd chosen. And now I can just go to the menu, pick a level, launch into it, and hit main menu again, and yeah, it will take me out. And then I can go back into a different level again. So it just helps you navigate and zip around, I guess. So yeah, I think that looks pretty decent as well. This is the beta build, but I think that menu is pretty much how it's going to look, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with that. I've also polished up the UI in general, added some icons and stuff just to make it feel, yeah, a bit more like an actual thing, I guess, rather than just a prototype. I've changed this input screen. So this is, after each level, you enter your subjective units of distress, is what they're called. And we're using that to basically chart the anxiety response. And I just made it so that you actually have to pick a value here before any of these navigation buttons below become active. So that way there's no way of, you know, accidentally selecting next level and then hitting the button twice and progressing on before actually selecting your anxiety rating. So you can see the button sort of toggling on and off there as we're sort of, yeah, selecting a rating. So we have a new system that actually graphs out all of that data now. So it's this button here, this usage data. Maybe I should find a different name for that because usage data sounds kind of boring. But we go into here and then we have this whole new screen. So yeah, so in the save file, we're basically saving for each level records of yeah, each anxiety rating, like with a date next to them. And this basically lets us chart, hopefully, the decline in anxiety ratings, sort of as time goes on. So we have some dummy data here. And how this works is you select these levels, and as you do, it then populates like the axes and the lines and stuff based on how many results there are for each level. So when, say, level 3 only has 3 attempts, so only have like 3 lines on the axis basically. Then if we activate level 5 on this graph, that has 4 attempts, so redraw the whole thing and show, yeah, that different sort of scale, I guess. And this works pretty well, I think. Needs a bit of polish, but I think this does a pretty good job of, you know, conveying the trend in the data, I guess. And the idea is that people can basically use this to, I guess, confirm to themselves that, yeah, that the system actually works as intended. Hopefully. It would be cool to start seeing some of the anxiety ratings that we get back from the beta testers. Yeah, and see how they get on with it. So that's pretty exciting. So the way this works is relatively simple. Each of these lines is a different line renderer. So there's one line renderer for each level, each one on a different sorting layer. So there's no Z fighting going on. And what we're basically doing is each time the axis and like the scale of the graph refreshes, we're basically mapping out a new coordinate system based on like the intervals between each line. So say this bit here, intersection of 1 and 1, that would be, say, 0, 0. Then you have 1, 0, 1, or 0, 1 up here, 1, 1 over here, that kind of thing. And we're basically using that to plot out the like points for the line renderer for each level, which isn't too complicated. Again, you can have a look through the code for this in the description below in my repo. Again, it's not particularly elegant. I'm starting to get to the point where a lot of my code, pretty much every file now, has a bunch of like, you know, to do clean this code up, or like, you know, to do optimize this. So I need to have like just a week where I just go through everything and just, yeah, optimize all the code and make it easier to read, easier to maintain, and more performant as well, I guess. That'll be a fun week. Not this week, though. Some point in the future. I have more feature work to do first. But yeah, so that pretty much gives us a fairly understandable layout of what the anxiety trends are doing. I think I touched on this before, but the plan is eventually to have each user have like an anonymized ID, and then whenever they enter a rating, send that data off to a server somewhere, and then have a web page where it aggregates all of that data and then has this like big super graph where you can see, with enough people, hopefully an average trend in the right direction after using the system enough times. So that would be super, super exciting. And that would be like a big sort of public proof of concept of, this kind of a treatment actually can work, which would be really cool. Last thing for today then is our architecture changes. So we have this new Spotlight controller, which we touched on earlier. Level 10 and level 5 both have that because they both have the mazes. They just tell the controller which spider to be tracking. It's fairly simple. The green and the purple, they're new. I'm not going to talk about the analytics logging today. I'll cover that in the testing stuff that we'll chat about next episode. Purple's new, so there's a new manager for the main menu, and this has a bunch of these level selection row managers. So each of these rows basically has its own controller, and that controller will, just fill in like the score and fill in the number of stars that you have for each level. So the main menu manager has an array of these level row managers, loops through each one, and then, gets the data from the save game, and then, tells it to populate its own row, basically. Just a kind of easy way of separating that out. So, main menu manager gets the, say, score for level 5 from game manager, which gets it from the save game, and then it sends it to the 5th level selection row manager. That's fairly straightforward. The SUDS graph manager, which we just talked about, that is responsible for displaying all of the anxiety data, that's subjective units of distress graph manager, and again, that will get the SUDS ratings from the save game through the game manager. We have a new UI for settings. I think that's also something that I'm going to leave for next episode, and we're going to talk about, some different settings, some graphic settings that are going to affect our performance, just a way of, helping keep the system accessible to everyone that doesn't necessarily have the same, spec hardware, and, having the option to reduce the graphical fidelity a bit, just to get it running a bit smoother. Because sitting in a headset at like 30 FPS is a pretty good way to make yourself feel sick. But it's coming along. Definitely a few bits here that I want to improve. This is a bit of a lie. I haven't actually done this yet. We touched on this a few episodes ago. This is actually still 2 separate controllers that both have each other and both sort of switch control between each other. And I keep meaning to make it one unified class that inherits from these 2, rather than one that inherits from this one and one that inherits from this one. But again, the feature work is just more exciting. So I kind of want to do that first, which is a really bad way to look at it, because the more feature work you do, the harder it gets to maintain. So I need to discipline myself a bit and do more of the housekeeping stuff. But that is pretty much all I have to update you guys on. Next week we'll talk about testing, we'll talk about performance, lighting, graphics, that whole thing. And I'll see you guys there. Thanks for watching.